Gentlewoman from North Carolina reserves. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I want to thank the gentlelady from North Carolina for yielding the customary 30 minutes, and I will yield myself of that such time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Madam Speaker, today's rule provides for consideration of 3 bills. H.R. 7666, the Restoring Hope for Mental Health and Mental Well-Being Act, H.R. 5585, the Advanced Research Projects Agency Health Act, and H.R. 4176, the LGBT Date Inclusion Act. 2 of these bills represent the progress that can be achieved when we work together on legislation that is important to the American people. It underscores what can happen when we work together regardless of party ideology. I do want to recognize the hard work that the members of the Energy and Commerce Committee put into the Restoring Hope for Mental Health and Well-Being Act of 2022. This package is the first major effort put forth to address our nation's mental health crisis since the lockdowns began for coronavirus. Following COVID-19 and the pandemic, we've seen a tremendous increase in youth mental health conditions, suicides, overdose deaths, exacerbating the mental health crisis we already faced prior to the pandemic. This bill maintains the flexibility for states to make their funding decisions that best addresses the needs of their communities. The spending in this bill, and this is important, the spending in this bill is fully offset and targets funding toward the treatment of serious mental health conditions instead of generalized wellness programs that may not have an impact. Included in this package is the Into the Light for Maternal Mental Health and Substance Use Disorders Act of 2022. That's actually a bill that I introduced with Representatives Yvette Clarke, Jamie Herrera Butler, Young Kim, and Doris Matsui. That bill authorizes and funds existing programs to help those impacted by maternal mental health conditions. Substance use disorders and mental health conditions are among the top leading causes of death for women who are pregnant and recently pregnant. When I was a resident at Parkland Hospital in the 1970s, the top 3 causes of maternal mortality, hemorrhage, preeclampsia, or hypertension. Now the preeminent causes are suicide and drug overdose, entirely preventable causes of maternal mortality. And this bill will help us address that. So I'm very encouraged to see that move across the finish line. I also supported an amendment by Representative Drew Ferguson to include the Behavioral Health Interventions Guidelines Act. He likes to call it the BIG Act. And Representative Ferguson and I actually introduced that as a standalone bill. But this amendment was made in order during Rules Committee yesterday. The BIG Act passed the House last year with broad support. It requires the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration to develop best practices for schools to establish behavioral health intervention teams. I heard from one of my colleges in Texas, Texas Tech University out in Lubbock. Texas Tech University and the Health Science Center brought to me their successful program to provide training for behavioral health intervention at schools in West Texas. They are school-age children. It's no secret sometimes in school. You know who the person is, the kid who's getting into trouble, the kid who's actually self-identified. And this is a way to provide the guidelines for that behavioral intervention that can be life-changing and life-saving. By establishing these behavioral intervention teams, the BIG Act helps to encourage prevention measures and interventions before youth mental conditions worsen or become even more serious. Unfortunately, we continue to see the consequences of not addressing mental health issues. This rule also contains H.R. 5585, the Advanced Research Project Agency Health Act, or ARPA-H. ARPA-H is modeled after the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency, DARPA, and the Advanced Research Projects Agency in Energy. The goal is to bring a greater focus on the research and development of our greatest healthcare challenges in areas where the private biopharmaceutical companies are unlikely to explore for scientific or business reasons. ARPA-H was initially authorized in fiscal year 22 in the omnibus budget and placed within the National Institute of Health. But placing ARPA-H within another department of the Department of Health and Human Services risks its independence, and its independence is its entire reason for being. Without its independence, I don't know that ARPA-H would have the ability to foster innovation. But this bill secures ARPA-H as an agency independent of the influence of the rest of the executive branch, and that's important. With significant Republican input, we ensured that this legislation also is fiscally responsible. We also make certain that the goal and mission of this agency is focused on research and development and provides accountability for this new research agency when submitting feedback for projects supported by the agency, as well as prohibiting the federal funding to China and to Russia. The bipartisan manager's amendment also ensures that the number of offices is cut from 14 to 6, what I call bureaucratic streamlining. And at least 2 of those 6 offices are actually dedicated to research and development. And the administrative costs of the agency, and this is extremely important, the administrative costs are capped at 15%. ARPA-H will provide the ability to focus on high-risk, transformative technologies to improve healthcare outcomes for all Americans. The final bill that we're considering today requires federally administered surveys to collect information on sexual orientation and gender identity. The list of surveys affected in this bill is over 130. And it does include the every 10-year census. The information requested by this bill is deeply personal and involves a person's internal state of being. I have to point out that the federal government does not have a good track record of protecting Americans' private information as evidenced by data breaches over the last several years. The final concern with this bill is it is asking about very personal information without a clear statutory or regulatory need, but still, we're prohibited from asking a person's citizenship status. I don't think I need to say any more about that. With that, I urge opposition to the rule, and I reserve the balance of my time.